when you're the leader of the military, which is pretty kind of much what the Secretary of Defense is, like the civilian head of the military under the president, right? You probably need administrative experience or like high level, general level military experience. This guy has literally none of that. He runs a show on Fox News. He doesn't run
on the weekends. On the weekends, he doesn't even do it the goddamn weekdays. He's the weekend
like that's
shift.
my point. Like people like say whatever you want about Lloyd Austin. Say whatever you want about Lloyd Austin. Maybe he's not the best Secretary of Defense, but he's clearly qualified.
Pals, I think you're really going to enjoy this video. If you do, please hit the like and subscribe button and comment button. It really helps out.
So Thune being the majority leader is not the worst news. That could have been so much worse with Rick Scott.
So let's talk about that. So let's talk about the one major setback that MAGA Republicans endured today, and then because it transitions quite nicely, since we're talking about the Republican Senate, into Trump's cabinet selection. So Hutch teed it up. There was a vote today to pick Mitch McConnell's replacement as the Republican leader. Mitch McConnell is serving out the remainder of his senatorial term, but he's kind of doing what Nancy Pelosi did. He's serving as a representative, but he will no longer be part of his party's leadership. I think unlike Pelosi, it's because McConnell was effectively forced out. He has no real capital or credibility with the MAGA movement. And there were three options: John Thune, John Cornyn of Texas, and Rick Scott from Florida. Where's Thune from?
South Dakota.
South Dakota. John Thune from South Dakota, Rick Scott from Florida, and John Cornyn from Texas.
With an anonymous vote, by the way, which is...
Yeah, with an anonymous vote from the 53 Republican senators. And Rick Scott was the MAGA favorite. And let's just tee this up. The people behind Rick Scott included Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, there were others as well, Tucker Carlson, like major MAGA influencers publicly advocating for him. Benny Johnson, and he was the first one out. He was the bottom of the pack and lost in the first round. Then in the second round, it ultimately went to Thune. So this was a MAGA setback because MAGA's pissed. I mean, Benny Johnson's bitching about it. Cat Turd's bitching about it. A lot of people are really upset. The question is, will this manifest in meaningful pushback to Trump's agenda? And I think there will be more pushback from Thune, but I don't think that's going to amount to much at all. But that's my opinion. What do you guys think?
Well, we shouldn't expect him to be like a resistance lib, but it's better than Rick Scott, like for sure, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, actually, because I think one of the reasons why Rick Scott didn't get voted on is because he actually does have, I would say, like pretty asynchronous views with Trump. Like, for instance, he's been a Republican he's been one of the few Republicans for a long time who has just said, we need to raise taxes on poor people and cut welfare. Like, he's totally willing to make that statement, and not only make that statement, propose a plan to do that. Like, people can look up like the Rick Scott tax plan, and it's insane. Like, it's just filled with insane it's filled with stuff that Trump, like, to Trump's credit, like, and I don't, who knows what this administration will look like, obviously, if he's talking about Mike Lee for cabinet positions, he's a similar guy. But Trump is not really like a neocon in that sense of like just wanting to like slash all these welfare programs to the bone and like raise taxes on poor people in some explicit sense. And so I don't actually know if Rick Scott was like, because even Trump didn't explicitly endorse one of these people. I'm just not convinced that Rick Scott was like actually the MAGA pick.
Well, let's be clear. I don't know if he was the Trump pick, but he was the MAGA pick in terms of
that's true.
Major influencers around Trump. Pisco, what do you think about John Thune as Senate Majority Leader?
I think that it frankly doesn't tell us too much about the extent to which Senate Republicans are going to try to buck Trump, because Trump kind of okayed the notion that the Republicans should pick it among themselves. And I think that all of these, you guys can still hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All of these Senate Republicans are kind of MAGA, and they're kind of beholden to the cult. It's just a question of degree. And so I don't think it's that useful as a signaling tool for like what's going to happen and what's not. And I think, the MAGA online commentator space got really into it because they want to go after anyone who's ever said anything bad about Trump ever, except the ones who have like literally pled fealty or whatever, or like JD Vance or something. So, but I don't really see much of a difference in my mind between a Rick Scott and a Thune to me,
Well,
I consider them largely equivalent in terms of what they'll be willing to do. But maybe I'll be
who
wrong.
were the 7 Republican senators that voted to impeach Trump? So we have Collins in there. We have Murkowski, or convict Trump.
Romney. Romney was one of them.
The guy from
I don't.
Alabama. There was a senator from Alabama. Surprisingly,
From Louisiana, I think too.
Tuberville. I mean, I don't know if any of that really matters because a lot of those votes were made under the auspice of, oh, Trump's really done it this time. Like he's not coming back.
And he was an
it's the
outgoing
reason-
president. You got to remember also the Senate,
Yeah.
the conviction, the trial itself was conducted after Trump left office.
Yeah.
So he was at his nadir in terms of political and hard power. He was at his most vulnerable.
I mean, they had like this idea that, like, oh, we can pretend to be courageous now because, Trump is done, because everyone's going to hate him after January 6th. But that just turned out to not be true. So I don't really put much stock in those votes. A lot of those people are retiring anyway. But no, I think there's a decent chance that some of these people get voted down. I would have to imagine that Matt Gaetz would have a very difficult time getting confirmed. I'd be surprised if he got confirmed. Now, at the same time,
if I had to bet, I would bet that he would. I think that he could have some challenges, but I think he would.
I mean, I literally cannot imagine a guy paying for a child prostitute with a Venmo transfer would be like the guy who's the attorney general. I mean, look,
Trump's an adjudicated rapist. That's the thing.
Trump leaned on them.
Yeah, that's the thing.
But,
if Trump doesn't explicitly, which I don't. He proactively made Gaetz his nominee, so that's even more important than an endorsement. He's saying,
but Gaetz is more disposable than Trump. Like he can't get away with as much.
No,
right?
No, but I think my point is, I think to Pisco's point, I think if Trump wants Matt Gaetz to be his attorney general, let me put it to you like this: if Trump really wants Matt Gaetz to be his attorney general, it's not just a slight preference. He really wants it. It happens. It's done. I don't believe that the Senate Republicans, certainly not under. I think Thune will whip votes if Trump says, "I want this man as my attorney general."
Wait, guys, hold on. Breaking news. Breaking news.
Send me the link. Send me the link so we can share it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So Matt Gaetz, apparently, according to this link, and I'll link it right now, has officially resigned from Congress.
That's
So
40 minutes ago news.
Potentially funniest thing in the world could happen. He resigns from Congress, but still doesn't get confirmed. We might be rid of Matt Gaetz once and for all.
No, he's not even. Econoboi, his position hasn't started, right? He was elected to a new term, and so he's resigned from the one that he has.
He resigned from the current term only? I didn't.
Yeah.
He
you
issued
can't
his
resign from a position
resignation
you
letter.
don't have.
He said he issued his resignation letter effective immediately. That caught us by surprise a little bit, but I asked him what the reasoning was, and he says, well, you can't have too many absences.
No, the reason is because they're about to release an ethics report on Friday. They were going to release a damning ethics report on him, and when he resigns, they won't have jurisdiction anymore over the thing. So I don't know if you'll ever see the report. It'll make the light of day. That's why he resigned.
The speaker pointed out that Florida state law gave the governor, quote, about an 8-week period, end quote, to fill a House vacancy, and that by doing so, quote, we may be able to fill that seat as early as January 3rd. What?
That's a lie because he.
Did you say it's a lie?
That's a lie. Johnson just said that. He can't get into the role. He doesn't have the role yet, right? He was elected for a separate term, right? I understand that we think of him as having a continuous job, but really he gets a new job, technically, right? A new term, and on that date, and it's not like he's been dutifully elected to that term. He can refuse to be sworn in, but what can he do to speed up the process if he's like the actually elected person until the time it is to fulfill that position? I don't see how.
I'm confused.
Pisco, I get what you're saying, but I think that at the end of the day, like this confirmation, I mean, my understanding is that Senate confirmations, I don't think that I guess theoretically they can happen before the new president takes office, right? Because the Senate takes office beforehand.
No, they can't. What are you talking about? The president has to nominate. He's not the president.
Well, no, but I get what you're saying. I'm saying that the Senate takes office beforehand. But anyway, that just goes to my fundamental point, which is that the new term has to start before he actually gets officially nominated. So if he's in Congress come January 3rd or 4th or whenever.
But what I'm saying
Congress
is him resigning now. him resigning now makes no difference between now and January 3rd.
It might not, but I'm saying
that's
it's
what
not. It's
Johnson's
not
saying.
clear. It's not clear to me, at least in this article, that it's not clear to me that he is going to remain in Congress if he fails a nomination. But you could be right. I'm not sure.
No, I
just
think
thought
it's quite possible he resigns on January 3rd.
Yeah.
I'm just saying when Johnson says he's doing it to help us, play someone faster. I don't think that that's true. I think he's doing it because
I'm sorry. I
he doesn't
thought you
want the
meant
ethics
that,
report.
I thought you said that. I thought you meant that it was a lie that there was an 8-week period that DeSantis had to replace. I'm like, why would he lie?
No.
that?
I'm saying
Yeah,
Johnson
what I
is
thought.
lying. So Johnson
Yeah.
is making it out to be like, oh, this guy Matt Gaetz, like he resigned to help us out, and because it'll make it faster for DeSantis to do the legislation or appoint someone, whatever the process is. I forget actually. I think you have to an election or something.
Yeah.
And what the real reason he's resigning now is because there's a damning ethics investigation report that's about to be released, and he wants to remove jurisdiction.
I think unfortunately, what like the Gates and the what's that guy's name, like Hegsworth or something, his
Hegseth.
DOD nominee.
Well, we're going to segue to that just real quick because that needs its own fulsome conversation. So my last question is on Thune. Does anybody have anything that they want to say about Thune's appointment to replace Mitch McConnell, or have we said all we need to say about that?
I don't have any more thoughts.
Yeah, he's a MAGA guy, like all of them.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. So Donald Trump has been making then a number of appointments or nominations to senior staff and the cabinet, many in the past several days. Obviously, you have J.D. Vance, who is on the ticket. He doesn't make that appointment himself. That's part of the ticket. But Marco Rubio for Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense is Fox News host, or is proposed to be Fox News host Pete Hegseth. We've already talked about Matt Gaetz a little bit. Republican from Florida has been tapped to be the Attorney General. Secretary of Homeland Security is South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem. John Ratcliffe is Director of the CIA. Susie Wiles is Chief of Staff. Again, for those of you who don't understand the role, the Vice President might be the second highest ranking person in the executive branch. But besides the President of the United States, by far the most powerful person is the White House Chief of Staff. So this one is one to watch. Lee Zeldin will be the Director of the Environmental Protection Agency. Tulsi Gabbard will be the Director of National Intelligence.
That one to me is the most egregious one.
And Elise Stefanik will be the UN Ambassador. So let's talk about this. Let's start with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. How do you guys feel about little Marco being
not the worst pick it could have been? It's not great, but there were a lot of worse options. I'd rather it be him than Vivek. I'll say it that way.
Yeah, it's not clear to me how Rubio became so cozy with Trump. Like, he was even mentioned as a serious VP contender for Trump, and I'm just like, how did Rubio? He was so lambasted. Like, obviously, like okay, take Ted Cruz for example. Ted Cruz has done his best to just suck up to Trump as much as possible. It is not clear that Trump has any love for Ted Cruz at all. But it seems like Marco Rubio has really like rebuilt his reputation with Trump, and I'm not sure how that happened. He's not the worst pick for Secretary of State possible. It could have been like Rudy Giuliani or something like that. But I think that the theme that I see and this is the scary thing, the theme that I see in these nominations is he's clearly putting like the substantially more sycophantic people in the positions of actual law enforcement. And that's the scary thing. It's like, it seems like he really is like going to full revenge, like clear out these departments, institute a lot of these fake investigations. That's like the theme that I see with a lot of these nominees, where like the slightly more establishment people are getting essentially non-law enforcement or like national security related issues. Obviously, Secretary of State's diplomacy related, not really a military role. But like his head of the military is like just a guy who hosts a show on Fox News.
Yeah,
we'll
talk about that. But on Rubio, I just want to say this one was interesting to me because to Hutch's point, in terms of competence, Marco Rubio is not the most offensive Republican. Marco Rubio is a smart guy. He's an educated guy. He understands foreign policy, even if he would make decisions that we all disagree with. But the interesting thing is he's a neocon or has coded neocon for decades, and he's very hawkish. And it was interesting to see the reaction from prominent Trump supporters about Rubio being named. They wanted Vivek Ramaswamy. And so Dave Smith and others were pissed that Trump appointed a neocon here. Does anybody want to talk about that? Because I find that their outrage so funny and so indicative of how stupid they are that they thought for a second that Trump wasn't willing to give positions to neocons. He did it in his first term. Why the would we just assume that he wouldn't do it in his second term at all? Does anyone want to weigh in on that and the reaction to Rubio?
Yeah, it's I get it a little bit, and we beat on them a lot, honestly. The contingent of Trump voters who were like, he'll be less hawkish in various different places, or people who literally thought that he was going to be pro-Palestinian for whatever reason. And it just goes to show he's not necessarily an ideological guy in many respects. I think he cares more about the notion that people are loyal personally to him. And that almost means that I'm going to hate every single one of his picks, because every one of his picks is going to, by necessity, have this personal loyalty as opposed to competency. See Matt Gaetz, as opposed to anything else. It's just people who get his ear, people who flatter him, that kind of thing. But that also has the effect of that if he's flattered the right way, he can give seemingly contradictory kind of people. So you have Tulsi Gabbard nominated for, is it National
Director of
DNI.
National Security?
Yeah, DNI.
Or National Intelligence, I'm sorry.
Right. And you also have Marco Rubio, pro-Iraq war, pro-intervention, very pro-Israel, all that kind of stuff, is the Secretary of State. And so there are these contradictions that will emerge, which I think contradictions are, in some sense, the essence of fascism in many respects, because what ultimately matters is the dear leader. And so it is, to me, very funny that people who are trying to track Trump as an ideologue, when they have to twist themselves up into like pretzels to explain what's going on, and this is for leverage, it's for speak softly and carry a big stick or something like that, or he's gonna play Rubio off like the madman or something. I've even heard that people like he's gonna be the good cop and Rubio's gonna be the bad cop. Like, what the
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's just a loyalty test. I think you're absolutely right to say that he's not ideologically driven. He's just appointing people that he knows are going to be unconditionally sycophantic for the entire administration.
And I think there's for my theory is for Rubio, I think part of it is too, my guess is that Trump enjoys watching people who previously challenged him, and certainly as very few did as vociferously as Marco Rubio did in 2016, in public twist themselves into knots to please him. I would
Hegseth,
imagine.
Hegseth, I think had said some anti-Trump stuff in the past before. I think he was a never Trumper in 2016.
Well, let's turn to Hegseth then. So again, this is a guy who's hosted Fox and Friends weekends for 8 years. He is a combat veteran. He earned 2 Bronze Stars, but a guy who's never had a particularly high rank. And again, has spent 8 years as a propagandist on Fox News. This is one that, this was before Matt Gaetz obviously was announced, but people were like ringing the bells. What an unqualified candidate. Marco Rubio at least makes sense. He's not as offensive. I would say Pete Hegseth is offensive to a lot of people who wants to take Pete Hegseth.
Hegseth also, for a little bit of context, was the one that convinced Trump to pardon. He was a Navy SEAL in Afghanistan that murdered a teenager and forced his platoon to take a photo with the dead body. His platoon members also testified that they saw him murder Afghan teenage girl and an elderly man from a sniper's perch. But yeah, he was convicted of actual war crimes, and Hegseth was the one that convinced Trump to issue a pardon.
Yeah,
this is like the Rex Tillerson of Trump's second administration, where like a lot of people, when he announced Rex Tillerson for Secretary of State, were like, man, this is like a bizarrely terrible pick. Like, Rex Tillerson has like no plausibly explainable experience that would lead him to be good at this job. And like on Hegseth, I hope people understand, when you look up Hegseth, it's not like he was a commander in the military. It's not like he ran a local department that was maybe equivalent to, maybe he was like a National Guard commander or something. Like, this was a guy who was in the military, yes, and got a master's degree, and then just hosted Fox News for the last 10 years. Like, this is a guy who
he got his degree. He had 2 degrees from Harvard and Yale, or Harvard and Princeton. No, it was Yale and Harvard. And I thought those were supposed to be woke universities.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So that's the other thing.
He was one of the non-DEI people. He actually earned it.
Oh,
obviously,
gotcha.
Jesiah.
Gotcha.
But no, I think what people have to understand, like, is obviously, like, when you're, it's so crazy to say this, when you're the leader of the military, which is pretty kind of much what the Secretary of Defense is, like the civilian head of the military under the president, right? You probably need administrative experience or like high level, general level military experience. This guy has literally none of that. Like the head of our military has basically, come 2025, has like no experience running at all. He runs a show on Fox News. He doesn't run
on the weekends. On the weekends, he doesn't even do it the goddamn weekdays. He's the weekend
like that's
shift.
my point. Like people say whatever you want about Lloyd Austin. Say whatever you want about Lloyd Austin. Maybe he's not the best Secretary of Defense, but he's clearly qualified. Like you couldn't plausibly make the argument he doesn't have the qualifications.
Lifelong
to be the
soldier,
Secretary of
combat
Defense.
veteran. He held the rank of general. Yes, this is a man who at the operational and administrative level, not only for long periods of the time, but on a scale has commanded thousands upon thousands upon thousands of troops. So he has the administrative and military background, and Hegseth has neither.
I think Hegseth will be one of those guys that I think it'll be like Rex Tillerson. Like I think he'll have the job for like 8 or 9 months, and he'll either get fired or resign. It would be shocking if this guy actually was able to maintain this position, because I do think he'll be so just unbelievably incompetent that it'll show very quickly.
Does anybody else have anything on Hegseth? Because we got some others on the cabinet I know we need to talk about the next 15 minutes.
Well, one person that's not even on this list that I think is hugely consequential is the ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee.
Mike Huckabee, yep.
Who is like a full-on evangelical, believes in the biblical prophecy, said there was no such thing as the Palestinians, fully endorses like completely annexing the West Bank. Yeah, it's if there's,
I was told, Hutch, that the Biden and Trump administrations would be the exact same on this issue.
Right.
Indeed.
There's something I linked in the private chat that'll be relevant, but if you want to touch on that, but yeah, that Huckabee one is a really big deal.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the Huckabee thing. We'll end on the link that you sent, Hutch. What about, again, any final words on Matt Gaetz? We talked about him a little bit. He's an attorney.
Awful. Yeah, it's an awful, disgusting pick. This guy is clearly a corrupt motherfucker who has made it abundantly obvious that he's willing to gut this institution that ostensibly is supposed to run if they don't follow his political agenda. There's no evidence whatsoever that he would dispense the law fairly and in an impartial manner. And I think that it's just a slap in the face to the profession. It's a slap in the face to the Department of Justice's storied career. And I think anyone who, and I'm even seeing it now, people who are trying to make comparisons to Merrick Garland, to pretend that Merrick Garland is in the same stratosphere as someone as unhinged as Matt Gaetz, a disgusting figure, a disgusting comparison, and everyone understands what it is. There's a reason why Senate Republicans, even though ultimately they may end up voting to confirm him, are acting shocked. It's a shocking pick. This guy's a pure partisan. He has no principles about him. He's a stooge of MAGA and a stooge of Trump. That's why he was picked. Nothing else. Can you imagine if it were the same on the other side? The kind of screams you'd be hearing from the Republicans.
One of the common complaints, I should say this, one of the persistent promises of Donald Trump has been that he will pursue using the levers of power, particularly the Department of Justice. He will wield those powers against his political opponents and his critics. And then you have other MAGA Republicans trying to sane wash and sanitize it, saying, no, of course not. They're not going to do that, even though Trump is nodding furiously in the background that he is. What do you think the likelihood is that there would be criminal prosecutions of Trump's opponents and critics if Matt Gaetz becomes
100%,
1000% if Gaetz is confirmed, but they're going to find out that it's actually not a straightforward thing to secure a conviction in federal courts. And so the same thing happened with that one who was that one guy, god damn it, who's the one guy that the inspector general that tried to bring charges to, was it Comey or McCabe, and then lost in court twice?
John Durham.
That guy, yeah, right.
John Durham, yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna find out. Like they think it's just as they think that that Biden called Merrick Garland into the Oval Office and told him to prosecute Trump, and that it's just this easy thing, but it's not. At the end of the day, you have to convince like a grand jury and then a jury, and then good luck with that. It'll be fun.
This is like the MAGA people who. This is like the MAGA people who thought that the Republicans would immediately be able to impeach Biden, like in retaliation, and it's like even on a political sort of paradigm, it's not clear that you can just like, just impeach him, right? Like they had a hard time impeaching even on such a polarized issue. Mayorkas, the Homeland Security,
failed the first time.
And it did fail the first time, right? And so what I see out of the Trump administration based on these picks is probably a lot of legal harassment, and unfortunately a lot of wasted money. IRS audits, I see that probably.
Comey and McCabe got IRS audits in the same year, and the chances of that happening are like astronomical.
Yeah, and let's be clear. Let's be clear. To Hutch's point, this is so important, folks. When you're told that Trump never went after his political opponents when he was president, when somebody tells you that, they are either one of two options. They are either a moron or they're a liar. One of the two, because that's objectively not true. To Hutch's point, there were criminal probes by the Justice Department. There were IRS audits into Trump's political opponents. The fact that very few of those attempts actually stuck is testament to the fact that the people Trump targeted were likely innocent, right? But Trump absolutely made attempts as the sitting president. Anyone who tells you otherwise is a liar or a moron.
Well, it's not just going to be pressure coming from Trump to weaponize the DOJ against his political enemies. The MAGA base is salivating for this too.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's all his friends. So the Department of Justice is going to be converted from a department and an agency with the sort of task of helping out the American people, with the American people as its client, to being a weaponized tool for Donald Trump and for him to use against people he doesn't like. And he did so earlier, before, when there was even kind of marginal opposition to him under Bill Barr. They created their own stream to put in Rudy Giuliani's conspiracy theories and start investigations into the Bidens. And so it was absolutely weaponized against, for political purposes, the Bidens and Democrats. And the other part that people aren't seeing as well, the Attorney General has a lot of other responsibilities in policy and that kind of thing. One of them, a big one, is immigration. And you can bet your bottom dollar when Donald Trump tries to do something completely unconstitutional, completely unlawful with respect to immigration, like, for example, revoking or purporting to revoke birthright citizenship, like, for example, not giving people the procedures that they're due under his at least alleged policy of mass deportation. That's what he says he's going to do. He's going to stand up for it. He's going to try to defend it. He's going to not put up any fight, not put up any kind of resistance to what is going to be blatant violations of our laws and Constitution. So
do you think they're actually going to do you think they're actually going to get away with the birthright citizenship thing? Because that's enshrined in our Constitution. Like, so that's no small thing.
There's a way they can play about it. There's one way they can try to play about it. So there's this case called Wong Kim Ark. This is a case from the 1800s where it was established as a settled precedent that if you're born in the United States, you have citizenship because of the 14th Amendment. But who knows with these judges? Who knows with these judges? They might say, even though subject to the jurisdiction of, there's a proviso in the citizenship clause, that has been sort of understood to be relating to kind of a few discrete categories of people who could be in the United States. One of them are the American Indians. So they do not get automatic birthright citizenship if they're living on reservations. Now, an act of Congress naturalized them anyway, so put that aside. The sons and daughters of diplomats, foreign dignitaries, they're not necessarily subject to the jurisdiction of the United States when they're here. So if you're the child of the ambassador from Zimbabwe, he's not necessarily going to get American citizenship. And the other one is foreign invaders. And that is a term of art in the United States, which means foreign countries with armies in the manner of a war invading your country. That would be but these judges, and you're already starting to see here. I don't know if you guys saw it from Judge Ho, who's one of these people who's on the short list to be on the Supreme Court, and has always been in his writings mentioning that it's a strong protection, the birthright citizenship. He said, but what about invaders? And so they're going to use this term of art, invaders, which was a recognized category that's not protected, to apply not to people arriving in a warlike fashion from another country as representatives of like an armed force, but to apply to anyone here illegally and to totally, do vulgar things to our Constitution and the original meaning of it. So yeah, I think that you could find probably 40% of the conservative judges who Trump has appointed who would sign on to that theory. At least 40.
So the other thing we should point out, people are talking about these cabinet appointees and Senate confirmation. One of the things that Trump is advocating for is the necessity of recess appointments. I just want to play this clip right here. This is Congressman Thomas Massey asked about the confirmation of Trump's cabinet picks, and this is what he has to say.
Do you think he'll get confirmed by the Senate? Then he should do recess. He's the Attorney General. Suck it up. Do you think he'll get confirmed?
So when they asked about Senate confirmation, he says, hey, recess appointments, he's going to be your Attorney General. Suck it up.
I just love how Thomas Massey, he brands himself as like, I'm just a libertarian. I'm just against government tyranny. That's the scariest thing to me is the idea of government tyranny. But what are you going to see? You're going to see all these constitutional conservatives go right out and say those checks and balances when it comes to the president under unitary executive theory, under this new immunity that he has, just appointing whoever he wants without any consent from our elected government. Who gives a shit about that, right? I mean, oh my God, dude, it's like the most unbelievable. It's just bizarre to me, because you'll find, you'll meet people, right? Like you'll meet people, in this space and just family members who will say things like, I think checks and balances are really important, and I fear government tyranny. But then they'll turn around and see Trump advocate for, oh yeah, just that whole hundreds years long process of the Senate confirming nominees from the executive. Well, I'm just not going to do that anymore. Like, what are we talking about here, right? Like, yeah, it just seems insane.
My experience with, and again, I hate to call him out because I do like him as a person, but I do think he's as unprincipled as any conservative lactoid. When people say that they're a constitutional conservative, red flags should go up in your head, particularly if they can justify voting for Trump, a man who has publicly advocated for terminating the Constitution in order to eject the sitting president of the United States and return him to power, a guy who's said that he wants to criminalize flag burning, which is literally constitutionally protected as a valid freedom of expression. So when people talk about checks and balances in the Constitution, but they enthusiastically support somebody like Trump, you have to understand that it's outcomes oriented, which is fine. Just be honest about it. For Lactoid, it's about preserving a 6-3 conservative supermajority on the Supreme Court. That's it. So he will tolerate, as many people like Ben Shapiro will, any abuse or excesses from Trump because they know that Trump is the best way to preserve that supermajority, and a Democrat would likely challenge it or at the very least appoint different types of justices should a vacancy occur. So yeah, I take none of it at face value.
I mean, what's especially insane about this? Last thing I was going to say, what's especially insane about this, he's talking about doing this in an environment where he's never had a bigger majority in the Senate. He's saying, my nominees are so completely insane that in the biggest majority I've ever had in the Senate, I'm still not confident they'll get passed. That's crazy. That should be a huge red flag for even conservatives who believe in Trump's message.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Tulsi before we close out.
Sure.
Schizo. What do you want to say?
It's so first of all, what does the DNI do? They are essentially in charge of our intelligence community. So they, NSA,
they're CIA.
Exactly. Yeah. And Tulsi Gabbard is a literal fire hose of actual Russian propaganda. She, at the start of the war in Ukraine, she was out there spouting Kremlin talking points within hours of the invasion, blaming it on NATO, blaming it on Biden, saying that Biden and Putin and Zelensky need to get in a room and practice the spirit of aloha. Like, it's actually insane. So this one to me is the most disturbing cabinet pick so far.
Yeah, I have nothing to say on Tulsi. I think that she's a joke. I think she's entirely too sympathetic to foreign adversaries. I think that she's a walking, probably national security risk herself. But again, this is really important that I don't know if the DNI, I can't remember if DNI needs Senate confirmation. I know the White House Chief of Staff does not, even though, again, it's arguably by far the most powerful role in the White House. And even if it does require Senate confirmation, Trump will get it one way or another. He'll either appoint her as acting DNI, he'll get the full-on confirmation, or he'll bully Republicans into a recess so he can make it a recess appointment. If he wants Tulsi Gabbard, he's going to have her. And it just does not bode well for the future of this country. Pisco, do you have anything you want to say before Econoboi jumps in?
No, I think that, again, it's an incoherent pick given some of the other people that Trump surrounds himself with, although largely in keeping with a pivot away from Ukraine and towards Russia. But yeah.
Yeah, I think in general what Tulsi represents, and again, I don't know. Tulsi strikes me as another one of these picks where like she might be on the job for like 7 months before she gets fired or resigned. We have to keep in mind, Trump's going to announce all these people. There's like an 85% chance that 85% of these people last less than 2 years and they get like turned over like crazy, because that's what happened when Trump was president the first time. And so Tulsi, I just kind of get that from this appointment. Like, maybe she'll last a while, maybe she won't. At the end of the day, though, the danger of an appointment like Tulsi, it's the danger of just like putting someone like Trump in charge, is that people don't realize, like, when you're the director of national intelligence, and this goes for like even like lower level positions at at departments like the CIA and stuff, you have access to all the secrets. There's nothing you don't know when you're the director of national intelligence, right? And obviously this was the controversy with Trump in the documents case is, he's just like, even if he wasn't doing anything malicious with the secrets that he was keeping, he was clearly improperly handling sensitive classified information, right? And I think that that's like the danger of somebody like Tulsi. I can't necessarily trust her to not just be like flippant and stupid with the custody of classified information. And of course, in the worst case, she could just be outright malicious and like share national intelligence with, Russians or like bad actors and, people like this, obviously, which puts a lot of our people at risk. I think that was something that Trump did, was he sort of flippantly mentioned like, oh yeah, we've got people in this region, to like a Russian counterpart. And obviously the danger to that is like, you're literally putting field operation people in danger when you do that, because it's like, hey, it's supposed to be secret that we're doing these things, right? But anyway, yeah, it's a pretty rough one.